Imagine buying a shopping mall. Hundreds of stores, thousands of customers every day, millions of dollars in rent flowing into your bank account. It sounds like one of the safest real estate investments you could possibly make. But here is something that almost nobody outside the industry realizes. A shopping mall can be almost completely full and still be dying. In fact, one American mall was once 98% occupied. It had more than 140 stores, 5 major department stores, and was one of the busiest shopping destinations in its region. Less than 20 years later, it no longer existed. Today, an Amazon warehouse stands where that mall once did. So what happened? Did people suddenly stop shopping? Did the owner make one catastrophic mistake? No. The entire business started collapsing because of something most shoppers never even notice. One store, not the smallest store, not the biggest source of rent. Just one store. Because shopping malls do not really sell retail space. They sell something far more valuable. And once you understand what that is, you will never look at a shopping mall the same way again. Most people think owning a shopping mall is simple. Buy a giant building, fill it with stores, collect rent, repeat every month. But when professional investors buy a mall, they are thinking about something completely different. The building is only the beginning. A large regional mall can cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build. The land alone may cost tens of millions. Then come the parking structures, the steel, the plumbing, the electrical systems, the escalators, the elevators, the air conditioning, the permits, and years of construction. Buying an existing mall is often cheaper, but that is where the real risk begins. Because you are not just buying concrete. You are buying every decision the previous owner ever made. Old leases, deferred maintenance, a leaking roof, a failing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, an aging parking lot, contracts signed 20 years ago, problems that do not appear during the tour but arrive as repair bills after you own the property. Then there is another mistake first-time investors make. They compare malls by price. Professionals compare them by location. A luxury mall surrounded by wealthy neighborhoods might sell for over $1 billion. An aging mall only a few hours away might sell for less than the price of a large apartment building. From the outside, they are both shopping malls. Financially, they are completely different businesses. Because when you buy a shopping mall, you are making a bet. The business isn't what you think. So, once you own the mall, how does the money actually come in? Most people answer that question with one word. Rent. That is true, but it is only the surface. Every store pays what is called base rent, a fixed amount for occupying its space. Some successful stores pay something extra. If their sales rise above a certain level, they also share a small percentage of those additional sales with the mall owner. Then come CAM. Charges, cleaning, security, lighting, parking lot, maintenance, escalators, hallways, landscaping. The tenants help cover much of those shared operating costs. Add advertising screens, temporary kiosks, holiday markets, parking revenue, and suddenly a shopping mall has multiple income streams instead of just one. On paper, it is an incredible business. Hundreds of tenants, several sources of revenue. A property that seems capable of generating cash from every direction. So why have thousands of malls struggled over the last 2 decades? Because none of these revenue streams are actually the engine. They are the result. The real engine is something most people never think about. Foot traffic. And that is where the strangest deal in commercial real estate begins. Because the most important store in the entire mall is often the one paying the least rent. The store that barely pays. Imagine you are leasing space inside your mall. One company wants a small clothing boutique. Another wants more than 150,000 square feet for a giant department store. Naturally, you would expect the larger tenant to pay dramatically more rent. But in many shopping malls, the opposite is true. For decades, stores like Sears, Macy's, JCPenney, and Nordstrom often paid only a fraction of what the smaller stores paid per square foot, sometimes nearly 10 times less. At first glance, it makes no sense. Why would a landlord willingly give away the best space at a massive discount? Because the anchor store is not paying with money. It is paying with customers. Most people do not drive to the mall because they suddenly remembered a small shoe store on the second floor. They come because they already know one of the big names. And on the way to that store, they pass dozens of other businesses. They grab a coffee, buy a birthday gift, walk into a clothing store they never planned to visit. Maybe they stop at a jewelry store. Maybe they leave carrying 5 shopping bags instead of 1. The anchor store did not just attract customers for itself. It created customers for everyone else. That is why mall owners accepted incredibly cheap leases. They were not renting space. They were buying traffic. And every smaller tenant was paying premium rent to stand next to that traffic. Once you understand that, the entire business suddenly looks different. A shopping mall is not built around stores. It is built around movement. And the moment that movement slows, the entire financial system starts changing. The domino effect nobody sees. Most people think the danger begins when an anchor store closes. It does not. The danger begins years earlier, inside the lease. Buried in many shopping mall contracts is something called a co-tenancy clause. It sounds harmless. It is not. Imagine you own a small clothing store. You agreed to pay high rent because thousands of people walked past your entrance every day. Then the biggest department store closes. Foot traffic falls. Sales decline. Should you still pay the same rent? Many retailers negotiated that answer decades ago. Their contracts say that if certain anchor tenants leave, they can legally reduce their rent. Some switch to percentage rent. Others negotiate discounts. Some can even terminate the lease entirely. One empty anchor store suddenly becomes 10 struggling stores, then 20, then 30. At exactly the same time, another problem quietly appears. The mall's operating costs do not disappear. The roof still leaks. Security still works every shift. The lights still stay on. Escalators still move. Property taxes still arrive. Insurance still has to be paid. Whether the mall is full or half empty, those expenses barely change. But the number of tenants paying for them does, which means every remaining business suddenly receives a larger CAM bill. Not because the building became better, because fewer people are sharing the cost. Now imagine you are a small retailer. Your sales are falling. Your operating costs are rising. Customer traffic is shrinking. Would you renew your lease? Many do not. That is why struggling malls rarely collapse overnight. They slowly bleed tenants. Each departure makes the next departure more likely. It is less like an explosion and more like a row of dominoes, the number that fools everyone. Whenever people hear that a shopping mall is 90% occupied, they assume it is healthy. Banks like hearing that number. Investors like hearing that number. Local newspapers love reporting that number. But occupancy tells you almost nothing about the business itself. Imagine 2 malls. Both are exactly 90% occupied. The first is filled with luxury brands paying premium rent. Customers are spending. Percentage rent is growing. Stores are competing for space. Cash flow is strong. Now look at the second mall. It is also 90% occupied. But several anchor stores are paying extremely low rent under leases. Signed decades ago, many smaller tenants received heavy discounts simply to keep the storefronts from sitting empty. Others are temporary tenants paying below market rates. From the outside, both malls look equally successful. Inside the financial statements, they could not be more different. One is generating wealth. The other is quietly running out of time. Experienced investors almost never ask, how many stores are occupied? They ask, who is paying full rent? Because occupancy measures space. Income measures survival. And no story demonstrates that difference better than a shopping mall called Rolling Acres. How one mall slowly died. Rolling Acres Mall opened in Akron, Ohio, in 1975. It looked like exactly the kind of project every investor dreams about. Sears signed on as an anchor. Then came more department stores, more retailers, more restaurants, more shoppers. Within a few years, the mall had grown to more than 140 stores and 5 major anchor tenants. On weekends, the parking lots filled up. Families spent entire afternoons there. Teenagers treated it like a social hub. For the local community, the mall was not just a place to shop. It was part of everyday life. By the mid-1990s, Rolling Acres was reported to be around 98% occupied. From almost every angle, it looked like a success. But underneath the surface, the system had already started to weaken. A newer competing mall opened nearby. Some shoppers changed their routines. One anchor tenant relocated. Another closed. A third was sold, rebranded, and eventually disappeared. None of those events looked fatal on their own. But every anchor that left took thousands of customers with it. Foot traffic declined. Sales inside the smaller stores began to fall. Some retailers chose not to renew their leases. Others negotiated lower rent. Vacant storefronts became more common. Operating costs stayed exactly where they were. The building was still just as large. The hallways still needed cleaning. Security still had to patrol the entire property. The roof still needed repairs. The bills never left. Only the customers did. By 2006, the mall had been sold for about $1.6 million. Years earlier, it had been worth well over $30 million. Think about that. The concrete did not disappear. The parking lot did not disappear. The building was still standing. What disappeared was the economic system that made all of it valuable. Eventually, the remaining stores closed. Copper wiring was stolen. Rain poured through broken skylights. The city took ownership after years of unpaid property taxes. Between 2016 and 2019, the entire mall was demolished. Today, an Amazon fulfillment center occupies the same land. The building died long before the wrecking crews arrived. The demolition simply made it official. Why some malls died while others got richer. Most people hear stories like Rolling Acres and reach the same conclusion. The internet killed shopping malls. That is only partly true. If online shopping had killed malls, every mall would have failed. But that is not what happened. Some of the most valuable malls in America became even more valuable. Why? Because successful mall owners realized something before everyone else. People were no longer visiting malls because they were the easiest place to buy products. Amazon had already won that battle, so they changed what they were selling. Instead of selling convenience, they started selling experiences. Restaurants replaced struggling retailers. Luxury dining replaced empty food courts. Medical clinics moved into former department stores. Fitness centers, entertainment venues, movie theaters, bowling alleys, even apartments, hotels, and office space. The strongest malls stopped asking, "How do we sell more products?" Instead, they asked, "How do we create reasons for people to leave their homes?" Because once people are physically inside the property, everything else starts working again. Restaurants fill up. Retail sales increase. Advertising becomes more valuable. Parking generates revenue. Even the smallest kiosk suddenly becomes premium real estate if it is placed where thousands of people walk every hour. The business was never about stores. It was about movement. The stores were simply renting access to that movement. At the beginning of this video, I asked a simple question. How can one store destroy an entire shopping mall? Now you know the answer. Because a shopping mall is not really a building. It is an ecosystem. Every tenant depends on every other tenant. The anchor brings people. The people create sales. The sales justify the rent. The rent pays for the building. Break one part of that chain, and the pressure spreads through everything else. That is why experienced real estate investors do not just study buildings. They study behavior. They do not ask, "How beautiful is this property?" They ask, "Why do people come here in the first place?" Because that is the asset they are actually buying, not the concrete, not the steel, not the glass. Attention, movement, human behavior. Rolling Acres did not fail because the building suddenly became worthless. The building was almost exactly the same. What changed was the reason people had to walk through its doors. And once that disappeared, everything built on top of it disappeared too. The biggest lesson is not about shopping malls. It is about business itself. The most valuable asset is often the one you cannot see. The wealthy rarely invest in buildings. They invest in the system that makes those buildings valuable. And in a shopping mall, that system has never been the stores. It has always been the people walking between them.